Don, you need a Zoom background.
I have one. It's just a blurry picture.
Okay, perfect.
It's the movies and all that stuff got kind of distracting and old really quick. So it's just an actual picture of my office, but it's blurry.
It doesn't have live people crossing through it, right,
It
Sean?
does not. And what I neglected to do was make the video of me coming in and handing myself a cup of coffee so I can. Somebody did that on one of the TikToks. It was amazing, simply amazing.
Look who's here. Ken, perfect timing.
For now, until his sound goes out.
Yeah.
I'm here for now.
Wait
I can
for
say
it.
hello quickly. No. All right, quickly, I call this meeting to order. Okay. It's like, all right, everybody's here because Liz said she's not going to make it. So I think everyone else is here. That's right. I keep forgetting I have to put on my gallery view. We're good. So I do call to order the Board of Education Budget, Finance, and Operations Committee meeting at 6:01. All right. So we should jump right in and talk about the financial report ending February 28th, 2021.
Happy to. There's not a whole lot to report between last month's financials and this month's financials. I'll go over some of the highlights that have changed. We did receive our first excess cost reimbursement refund of $716,950. That's slightly less than what we were hoping to get. Our next reimbursement will be sometime in June. And then we'll know whether or not what we'll have to cover. I do anticipate that we will have to cover something that we won't receive the full $1 million for in excess cost reimbursement. Other than that, all of our account lines are expected to be within budget. COVID has not really changed a whole lot, so I want to skip to the very last page of my report, if that's okay with everyone.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions for Dawn on the first few pages? Go right ahead, Ms. Norton.
All right. On the last page, I have a couple of items that I wanted to bring to your attention that have not been addressed yet within the budget that need to be addressed. We probably will start with that, addressing them in March, and we need to address them before the end of the fiscal year. There are some concerns that the district is required by the state of Connecticut Department of Education to administer their Smarter Balance Assessment and the Next Generation Science Standard Assessment. Both of these assessments are given on the computer through a secure browser. The only way to access this browser is with a district device. Therefore, the many middle and high school students that are currently using their own devices to access learning at home and at school will need a district device in order to take this assessment. In addition, these district devices need to be new enough that they can accommodate the latest updates required to run the secure browser. The tech team is analyzing the computers that we do have, the Chromebooks that we do have, and getting a count as to how many Chromebooks we do need in order to administer these assessments. And we'll be working on how many computers, how many more Chromebooks we need to purchase in order to complete that. Another area.
That, Dawn, if you don't mind.
Sure. No.
The Board of Education will hear more about that on the 22nd because Dr. DeSantis will be presenting on technology on the 22nd. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that you'll hear more about the tech piece. I'm sorry.
Just a quick question. Which grades are involved in both of these tests?
So grades 3 through 11 are involved in the SBAC and or the NGSS.
Okay.
I have a question. So how would a district like a high school or middle school in Bridgeport be handling something like this? Because I without having numbers, I don't know would they be able to finance a one-on-one device for their student population?
So I'll speak to that a little bit, Ken, is the grant money that some of these school districts receive is quite high. And so, as an example, some of the funds through the COVID relief funds, some of these communities might be receiving upward of $40 million. And so that's been a priority for many of the school districts. Also, the other piece to this is that the technology plans that these districts may have had, I can't speak for all of them, I'm not there and I'm not living them, but the technology plans that they've had have always had some type of rollover period, right? So we know that these devices are going to last 3 years. We have 500 of them. So over the next however many years, we're going to start replacing them. So we're not in this position. Unfortunately, we weren't there. And there's a number of different reasons why we weren't there. But that's part of it. The other added layer to where we are right now is that we have kids at home that will be taking the assessment on a device and kids at school. Whereas in the past, you might have been able to stagger a schedule and have like Chromebook carts. You might remember those before COVID. We had Chromebook carts, so we might stagger a schedule within a school that says, okay, grade 3 and 4, you're going to test on such and such day, and then great. But there's this whole other element where kids are going to be taking the test at home in addition to, so it's just a little bit more complicated. But many communities do have some type of plan that they shift over the devices as they go. And we started off with a lot of old devices. We got a lot of new ones, but we also weren't one-to-one. So I think there's just a lot of layers to where we are in Ridgefield.
Right. It just seems to me, and Sean would obviously have more knowledge on this, that there would be a relatively simple technology fix to allow people to use whatever. I mean, you just sign on to a secure website. And I don't know why there would need to add this level of complexity when there should be, at least to my mind, an easy solution from the state's part, not on each.
Yeah. You said the operative word, the state's part. It's a state program, and they made it. Have you tried VAMS yet? You'll love that.
Actually, I have.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, Ken. And having experienced this in another district as well, it was actually incredibly frustrating because the secure browser also gets updated by the State Department every year and or every couple of years. So in some ways, it's a bit of a moving target, even with their browser, in addition to Google and some other problems that we're having with many of these devices that has nothing to do with the secure browser because they're old. And quite frankly, these are not complex devices. They're incredibly economical and were intended for what the purpose that they were intended for. And therefore their lifespan, especially in the hands of little people, isn't as long as you might hope, let's just say. Number one, because they're economical, and number two, I think because they are in the hands of little ones.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one area. We have 3 other areas. I have 2 listed and then one I need to add to my memo for the full board. But due to COVID-19 on learning models and teaching in learning in general, all curriculum areas will need to engage in summer curriculum writing across grade levels in order to compact any missed learning into curriculum for the fall of 2021. This work would be in addition to any other planned curriculum revision projects.
So Dawn, you want me to just add a little bit of color to that as well?
Please.
And actually, there's
Sure.
something that's not in this narrative that I may as well just give you a little heads up on. Now that we know that spring is hopefully sprung, and that snow is going to hold off from Thursday into Friday, what we anticipate doing is that last week and a half, you might actually notice on Dawn's financials that the salary line still has funds there. So we have the last day of school, I believe, is the 14th. And if that's correct, there's 2 pieces that we hope to be able to maximize. One is curriculum writing and compacting, which is having our teams of educators come together, look at the curriculum that was not completed this year and start compacting either within the same grade level or within the next grade level. One, and then the second more important piece of work, or perhaps more important in my eyes, is that we're hoping to take advantage of kid contact time during that last couple of weeks in June, meaning that kids that K-12 that may have struggled this year for a variety of reasons, maybe in MTSS or some type of social emotional support. We're hoping to maximize those couple of weeks, again, using funds that may be remaining in the salary line to support kids that, again, may have been struggling, and we'll have some criteria in which we'll identify those children, and you'll learn more about that as a full board meeting. But those two things are on the radar. So curriculum compacting and supports for kids to identify some of those learning gaps. And that's in addition to extended school year, which will start, I believe, on that Monday, the 28th or so, the last week of June. So that primarily is for students with IEPs. The work that we'll be doing is with kids, could be kids with IEPs also, but general education children as well.
And in addition to that extra money in the salary line, are we anticipating additional expense on top of that?
We hope not. We're hoping to stay within our budget, Ken, but within our budget, we'd like to be able to maximize what we need for kids during the school year. And we have an advantage this year that we might have not otherwise had within the fiscal year, which is those 2 weeks at the end of June. And so if we can maximize that time in support of kids and reducing whatever learning gaps we can, especially if we're able to be in the physical world, I think we should do that. And for kids that are at the secondary level, trying to find creative options for them so that, again, whether it's credit recovery or kids that just fell behind for a variety of reasons, providing them support. Again, it's a unique advantage this year because we don't typically have that much time in June. And so, when we have monies in the salary lines, we're not able to often use it because the end of the year comes so quickly, and then we're into extended school year and we're into a new budget. This year may be a little bit unique in that way.
Thank you. And John, is there expense related to the devices for the testing?
Yes, there will be. Yes, there will be.
Do we have an estimate of what that is?
We don't at this time. They're doing an analysis at each of the schools for each of the levels to find out which Chromebooks are not compatible and which ones need to be replaced. And we should have that analysis completed hopefully by the end of the week. Then we'll have a better idea.
I think we are hoping to stay within budget to do that, right, Dawn?
We are, right, correct. And I kind of misspoke earlier when I said every account line is going to be within budget, because we do always have those 3 accounts that are trending over budget. The COVID line, there is obviously no budget was ever applied there, so that is always going to be over budget. We, of the $1.4 million, we only received the $716,950, so we are still over budget on that. We still haven't received that full amount. And then obviously school lunch, that'll continue to trend over budget as we go through. But we do have a little bit of savings in a few of the other areas because of the unique year that we have had. And so we hope to be able to utilize the funds there in order to cover these additional expenses that we're going to have to close out our year properly with the students. And then the last area that I need to bring to your attention, as a reminder, we have an unbudgeted, unfunded mandate to accommodate special needs students until the age of 22. That was a state or a legal ruling that was handed down to us at the beginning of this year, I believe. And so we will have some expense that we have to cover for our students that are going to be 22 and still under our care.
You had said there was a third thing that you had to add.
The third one, well, Dr. Silver had grabbed that part of it. The third one that I didn't have on here was the additional summer school for the last 2 weeks of June. Right. And so I can add that to the learning model as well, or have it separate. But yeah, that was the third one that I didn't write down, was the additional trying to reach out to those at-risk learners and get them some support for the end of the year, so that hopefully they are able to move forward.
Unsurprising to anyone, my internet I missed most of what you said, but I saw a lot of nodding, so I'm good too. The on your summary piece, should
Yep.
Should the potential be added for any of these any of these three things that you just mentioned? Could any of those negatively affect the budget? And if so, should they be included in there?
Right now, until I know what the cost is, yes, it could be. I could absolutely do that. I could add that in there. I believe on my summary of the positive effects of the budget are exactly in the areas that we do have the positive effect.
Right.
With the exclusion, I don't have transportation on there, and we've had a little bit of savings in transportation because of our month-to-month billing and our hour-to-hour billing versus what we normally would be paying them. And we did have some distance learning weeks that we didn't have any transportation. So we do have a little bit of savings there as well.
But there will be transportation costs for those 2 weeks also, right?
So actually, Ken, if these are general education students, I don't know if we're required to offer transportation. So that's something that we have to just sort through, because it's, we have to investigate that, because it will be an elective program. It won't be something that's part of a child's IEP, for example.
Got it. Okay.
It'll be optional. Ideally, we would want kids to come in. And we may still consider, as Ms. Gillette starts crafting the plan, we may consider offering an opportunity for kids to virtual in if that's the position that we're in. Although by that time, and we plan on preparing a presentation for the board for March 22nd, our hope is that our children will be in school, all of them.
Do you if it's fiscally possible, do you think that would encourage participation if the transportation option was there? Yes,
that might. You're right, Ken. And I think if we can manage it financially, it would make a lot of sense to do that for families. Especially if that would hinder kids' ability to get in physically. There's no alternative to that experience. The virtual works when it has to work. And I think it works for settings like this, but I don't think that it works for kids in the same way. And so if we can manage it financially and the numbers play out where we need them to be, then.
Right. And First Student can get drivers to come in those extra weeks.
Right. Well, that's true. And it could be, something like a modified schedule. So instead of doing, a stop at every house, maybe at the end of the road, or a common area within town or within certain areas of town, and maybe have 3 or 4 buses, something.
Yeah, so we'll sort through that piece. I think once we have a better sense of how many students would, and we'll speak to the full board about this, how many students would benefit from, how many educators we'll need, what will the classes look like, what are the sites that we're going to need, things like that, just understanding what that means for all the other pieces, including facilities and opening a school and preparing school for other programs. So you'll hear more about that, but it is a topic that we've been discussing at the cabinet level, and just want to be as thoughtful as we can in providing opportunities to reduce that learning gap for kids. And if we have the monies within our budget, we hope to be able to do so.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So are there any other questions on the financial part?
Looks like we're good.
Okay.
Everybody froze on my end.
For you. For us, we're good.
I'll give him a minute. There he goes.
He froze again.
You just keep talking.
Okay.
I'll type
I'm going on to transfers now. So you can follow along in the paper. There are 6 transfers that I want to bring to your attention for approval. The facilities has 2 of them, and I do see that I have a spelling error, actually an entire word error on the first one. Building repairs at the high school, $1,458. They have asked to move it from the building repairs at the high school to building repairs at Scotch Ridge Middle School. And this is because of an unexpected repairs, not retail, to the HVAC system at Scotch Ridge.
There's a typo under description also, by the way.
There.
It's triggering my OCD. The word repairs.
Oh, I guess I better hit my spell check on this. Thank you. I will fix that. That will not be going forward like that. The other request that they had was $7,500. They pulled it from projects at Eastridge to move it to projects at Farmingville, and that is to replace the domestic hot water tank. That was kind of an emergency. They needed to get that done.
Is there an Eastridge project that won't be done because that funding got moved?
I will have to ask. I don't believe so, but I will have to ask Joe that specific question.
And before we get too far away from it too, Dawn, I think it in that first transfer, I think that should be RHS, not HRS, just for the next iteration.
Wow, I guess I was
Typing too fast.
typing too fast, or yes. I think that was after my vaccination, so I'm going to use that as my excuse.
It works.
And then the next one is libraries at the high school. They're asked to move $1,275.62 from instructional materials to collections. They felt it was the need to start building their instructional. They don't have a need for the instructional materials due to the COVID, and they are requesting that transfer in order to start updating their collections. And then the last one, it's really one, there's 3 lines into one for special education. They have some teachers that are out, not on maternity leave, but not getting paid at this time. So it frees up some money in some areas for them to move to tutoring purchase services. So they've asked for elementary teachers, $29,877. Teacher speech, $22,777, psychologists, $698, all to be moved to tutoring purchase services, which is an outside service, $53,352. Any questions on any of those other than fixing those few errors that I have?
All right. As I keep having connection problems, if you do have any questions during this meeting, please just ask them, because I can't tell if anyone has any questions.
He's talking with Phil Frozen. There you go.
Exactly. See,
Like a bad movie with subtitles.
it's a bad movie even without subtitles. Yes. So I think everyone's good. Shall we move on, Ms. Norton?
Certainly. This is the COVID expenditure report. And as you can see from last month, there's very little that has happened between last month and this month with the reporting. The main areas that have increased in this report are salaries, obviously, because I do pick up the salary as the months do go. So I'll be gaining 2 payroll periods for each month that I'll be reporting. So total facilities, nurses, special education, technology, and curriculum purchases have been $1,121,306. The payrolls, the accrued payrolls, are through February 26, 2021. Health office paraeducators are at 13,841. Building substitutes, 264,444. We did not have any additional custodial overtime to add to our salaries, so that remains at 17,751. And the COVID liaison, 12,631 for $308,664.90 in salaries due to COVID. Moving to the second page, bringing that all together. But breaking it out as categories, we have the supplies, PPEs, and so forth. In addition to that, I've added the food service, the actual food service expense that we currently are carrying of $194,567.96. So bringing all of those together, that's $1,624,539.06. And from that amount, we have received and drawn down $296,154 in grants. We've transferred $189,888.95. And we have other funding, which is both from Anthem of $155,640.64. So offsetting our $1.6 million, we have $641,683, which leaves us to be covered $982,855. And we currently still are just carrying the 2 grants, although we do have a couple more grants that we'll be applying for. And that'll be coming up, I think, April. Susie, correct?
Well, April 7th, I believe it's due. So we'll start working on that
Application.
shortly. Yeah, and we're expecting another one after that, but that allotment hasn't been identified yet, at least officially.
So Dawn, I noticed the $30,000 increase on other funding. Is that also from Anthem?
That is from Anthem, yes. We were able to, we have a wellness, we have funds with Anthem for wellness. We normally would hold wellness gatherings, we would do health fairs and things like that with that money. But because of COVID and the distance, social distancing, we weren't able to do that. So we got permission from Anthem to use that towards PPE. So they cut us a check for $30,000, which we added to the COVID line.
So just a question. So to be covered, we're at 982. We're still expecting somewhere around 400 grand in, according to all the relief grants, or are those?
Yeah, but I do want to caution us on those because they're tailored for very specific reasons. So for example, the extension of that grant, we don't necessarily have to spend it all within 1 year or within this year, but a primary focus for that particular grant, the ESSER 2, is on learning gaps for kids. So let's just say that we have to bring some kids in beyond those June dates that I described, and we need to bring kids in the summer, or perhaps for extra support in the fall, whatever the needs of our kids, we would have to use those monies for that. So the way in which it's the grant, at least the brief look that I took of it, Sean, last week, is that the narratives are really more focused on student achievement, student learning gaps, social emotional supports for kids, as opposed to like the first grant that was connected to PPE and things like that. So I think when it comes to these expenses, we're going to be looking for other spots within the operating budget to cover, rather than using that grant, because I think the appropriateness of how we use it may come into play.
Well, but there is an ESSER 3 we expect as well, correct? And that's bigger than 2.
There's an ESSER 3 grant that's expected that's bigger than 2. That number has not been given to us officially by the State Department of Ed. As soon as we receive that, we'll give that to you. Now that, as I understand it, is expected to have a greater number of years in which it could be spent, so that we could really see where the learning gap for kids might be, meaning we may not be able to see the significance of, the lack of in-person learning for the first 6 months, but we may see it a little bit later. Some kids catch up. That's the reality. Some kids can be out of school for a month, come back in, and with a little bit of time and some support can catch up pretty quickly. Other kids won't be able to. So from what I understand, that grant is going to extend a little bit longer and give us a further opportunity to identify where the needs are. But I haven't seen it yet, Sean. So I'm hopeful that it definitely is bigger than ESSER 2, and that we have a little bit more time in which to spend those funds so that we can get our bearings on what we actually need. And just a little bit more context is some of these communities, the larger communities, as I mentioned before, are receiving a significant amount of money. And the challenge for those communities is that, even if the grant extended into 2024, it's not sustainable to hire people and then people just lose their jobs right in 2024. So how those communities figure that out, I don't know. I mean, I certainly can see how our community over a couple of years with the right supports for kids will be able to manage it well, because the numbers aren't coming in the way that these other communities are coming. At least,
Right.
I don't think.
Understood. I'm more focused on what's the break point where we know we have some funding from last year that got carried forward. Where's the break point, and what's the town going to be on the hook for at the end of that is the concern.
Yeah, so I don't want to speak for Dawn because she's the money's person, dollars, but I'll just speak to what I've noticed so far in our conversations with Dawn is our goal is to try to look at where we can identify the needs that we need to take care of, right? We need to take care of the technology piece for kids. We need to take care of summer learning. We need to take care of curriculum writing. And then where else can we look in our budget into some of the savings areas that Dawn has identified and that we have had, because I hate to say it, savings and COVID together, but that we have had related to COVID, and see whether or not we can manage at least a good portion of this within the budget. But I think we'll have a better idea of where we are in the month of April. Is that right, Dawn?
That's correct. That's correct. We need to find out what those numbers are going to be. We need to know what that expense is going to be. We have not received even our February billing from First Student yet, so I need to see where transportation is going to come in. If we change our learning model, would you call it a learning model? I don't know if
So without letting the cat out of the bag, on the 22nd of March, we hope that we can have a proposal that shifts from the position that we're in now into a more appropriate experience for our secondary kids. Either way, we know that at this moment, it doesn't look like we're going to be going into a full remote at this moment, right? It looks like that's out the window, right, at least for now, which obviously would save us more on busing. But that's out. And then the other option would be, are we going to be going hybrid, or are we going to need more plexiglass? And at this point, while there may be some associated costs with the proposal that we'll have on Monday night, I think we're leaning towards, okay, we're in a pretty good place for the last quarter of the year in terms of expenses. So when all of that is fleshed out, I think we'll have a better handle on where are we with our own budget? Where are we with making sure that within this budget we can touch base with kids and have hands on kids for that extra couple of weeks and some curriculum work. And at the same time, if we have to make some transfers to cover some of these extra expenses, where do we stand? So I hate to speak in maybes, but I don't want to put us in a position that unfortunately doesn't flesh itself out before we have all the bills in hand. So I think we'll know better in the month of April, and I think we'll have a clearer picture for not only our board, but the other boards that obviously need to plan as well.
Right. And we will keep you abreast as we as we are able to cross our T's and dot our I's and get more of the detail together. The last page of that report is the anticipated unknowns or possible unknowns. The salaries have been updated. Food service has been updated, and the rest of the last 4 have not changed at this time. We still may need some protective supplies, training materials, and obviously there's 30,000 there for technology. These have not been updated with the unknowns or the knowns that we need to cover that I just spoken about in the financial report. At this point, I didn't add them to COVID, even though they are sort of a COVID reason. With the kids not being in school, when them using their own devices, even if they had their own devices, we would still have to provide them a school device in order to do those assessments. So some money may be applied here, or it may be just applied to the actual when we get to that point.
Dawn, that the 300,000 for food service expense is in addition to the 185? 194, sorry.
194, right.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
our overall first assessment on what food service was going to be was 500,000.
Okay.
So we're kind of staying around that at this time. We do meet with them every month and go over the financials. The very variable in that equation is how much we do get back from the state. So as we get more back from the state, obviously that's less that we have to cover. We still believe that we can probably cover all of the elementary and middle school expenses with what we get back from the state, but we won't be able to cover any of the expenses at the high school at this time.
And is that anticipated reimbursement from the state in here?
Yes, as the on the financial line for
Right.
the food service.
Sure.
Yeah, that there's a net, any of the revenue that
The
comes
net.
in against the expenses is netted in there, correct?
So this is netted. Okay. Thank you.
Any other
Dawn,
questions?
I have a question about our reserve account. So I went back to the memo of September 21st, and the town was looking to use 1.122 of our unspent funds. And then the difference at the time was $633,542 for the reserve. Has that increased at all since this memo? Do we have like an amount that's in the reserve account so we know how much we could use towards this?
I believe when they made the motion, I believe the motion was up to 700,000, no more. But they did at that time, that's where we were with the funds. And so that's where that number came from, was at that time.
Okay.
But I believe when they made the original reserve memorandum or agreement, it was up to 700, I believe it was. No more than 700.
Rachel, is that your question, or is there a piece that
So there should be $633,542 in there, no more than that, though, right?
No more than 700. And at the time when they did the calculation as to how much of that percent, that 1% or whatever that they were looking at,
Okay.
it was the 600,000. But I believe the resolution that the original resolution was no more than 700. But when they had done the analysis at that time, it was only 600 and something. So
Okay.
that's what, right. So that's what the motion was, and the minutes showed at that point.
Okay.
So if I understand the process correctly, Rachel, is if we go over budget this year, we have the ability to spend up to $700,000 because that was the money that was left in the non-lapsing account for us to use. In the event that we go over that $700,000, then we need to go back to the Board of Finance, which then goes through a whole process for us to receive additional funds. So ideally, we're going to do everything that we can not to put the community in that position. So we're looking at all those lines that Dawn described as savings, at the same time being sure that we're considerate of the things that we described earlier around, tech and curriculum and kids, and seeing where we end up. But I can speak for Dawn here, and I know I speak for myself, and ultimately we don't want to be in the position to ask the town outside of that $700,000, and we'll look at ways in which we can do our best to use our savings that we couldn't predict in up until Dawn has all of her bills that we still can't, but that we couldn't predict back in August. And so I think Dawn has done a nice job of keeping the community and our board aware of the costs related to COVID. And so that it doesn't come to us and come to a surprise if we didn't receive some of the savings on the other end. But ideally, we'd like to be able to stay within our budget, which I think answers your question earlier, Sean, when you asked, in your words, how much is the town on the hook for? And, our potentially, it could have been this amount, but ultimately we're going to do what we can to stay within our budget.
right? As Dr. De Silva said, our goal is to use everything that we have within our budget before we have to reach out to use anything from the reserve.
Or outside of the reserve, you know.
Or, God, I hope we don't ever go outside the reserve, but.
All right, does anyone have any other questions? All right, is there anything else you wanted to discuss, Dawn or Dr. De Silva?
No, the only piece which I spoke to earlier, I think April will, you know, our next meeting in April will be, I think everything will become clearer at that time because we'll have a better understanding of what balances we're going to have, what savings we're going to have, and where we need to go with kids, and likely, to Sean's earlier point, where we are with grants and what those timelines are, and giving us a better sense of how that money can be spent.
That sounds good. All right, if there's nothing further, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, Rachel, thank you so much. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Stay
thank
safe.
you.